You're live, by the way. You're live.
Hi, everybody. I'm live. Where's Hudson? Huddy,
He's okay.
you want to jump on the live chat for a minute?
Bye. He just
Bye.
said.
He's not down.
I'll go get him.
He said bye. Okay. Thank you. Round of applause for my lovely producer and wife, Tori, that helped me get this set up. Yeah, we got a few things to talk about today. Unfortunately, not all of them are happy. I usually post a new video every week, but this week we didn't get to it. You might have noticed I posted a couple videos that were docs and compilations of fishing and mix of a bunch of my spring trips this summer. If you check that out, called Living Wild, and some planting and stuff I've been doing around the house, some homesteading type stuff. And I did that because very, very sadly, Tori's mom had a very rare brain disease called PSP that she's struggling with for several years, and very sadly we lost her last week. We got to spend her final days with her, which was very special, and we stayed with close family away from home for about 11 days to plan the celebration of life and stuff like that. So yeah, it was obviously pretty hard, but we're trying to be as positive and stay busy, and life does go on. Tori's got her workshop, Paddle Like a Girl, coming up. I have a big trip coming up, and we decided to just, although it's challenging, it was really good to get home. It was very healing to be back home. We were down in Barrie in the city for 9 days. It was very nice to come home and see that our gardens have been thriving due to some rain and some friends helping water them, and just to see our property here on the river. Apparently Huddy's camera shy all of a sudden. Okay, come here, bud. Sorry. There you go. We decided to just, as best we can, keep moving forward. Take time to grieve and move forward with all that is on our plates. So on a less sad note, my big upcoming trip is I'm going back to the Yukon territory. The Yukon, and the North for that matter, is really somewhere that just gets into your blood. It's very rare for someone to go do an adventure, spend time in the North, Alaska, the Yukon, Northwest Territories, Nunavut, or some areas, remote areas of the northern provinces, of course, northern Quebec, Labrador, and the Newfoundland too. Much of Newfoundland, for that matter, has that feel too. And it's hard to go to a place like the Yukon and not get almost like addicted to it, and want to go back. A lot of people, we even move there, and some people that don't know might think, oh, why would you go there? It's so cold. But there's something amazing about it. Something amazing about the people, the history, the way a lot of people still live there, but just the true remote wilderness, the wildlife, the opportunity to be somewhere where the mountains are nameless and the rivers run God knows where, as Robert Service wrote when he was talking about, when he was writing poetry about the gold rush era in the Yukon. So yeah, I'm heading back for one of multiple trips to the Yukon. My first time going to the Yukon, I was actually paddling the Stikine River, which is in northern BC, but we outfitted the trip out of Whitehorse, Yukon, and flew into Whitehorse, and then got a vehicle shuttle down to Dease Lake, and we paddled the upper and lower Stikine. Then, if you remember, I paddled the Hess River. I soloed the Hess River a number of years ago. That was probably 2018 or 2019, and that was crazy. One of the most challenging, likely the most consistent whitewater of any river in the Yukon. A couple years, in between then, Tori and I went back there for probably about 6 weeks or more. We went and we stayed in a remote. First of all, we drove there in the winter via the Alaska Highway, staying in a teardrop camper trailer. Then we lived in an off-grid log cabin. We snowmobiled through the mountains, ice fished, hunted for ptarmigan, went dog sledding, went winter camping, ended up doing a bison hunt with a friend, and snowmobiling all the way into the headwaters of the Wind River, which is a remote river that people take bush flights in to paddle in the summer. Just a bunch of really cool stuff like that. Then of course last year I came back and I paddled the Bonnet Plume River. I had such an awesome time on the Bonnet Plume River, but the trip was a little bit more fast-paced, a little bit more rushed than I'd like it to have been. I would have liked to do some hiking and stuff like that. You only have time for so much. I did gold panning, fishing and stuff like that. So this time I'm paddling a river called the Heart River. And this is going to be a full 14-day solo expedition. The Heart River is a whitewater river. It's not as demanding as the Bonnet Plume or the Hess. However, there is whitewater, and it's going to be a longer trip. Hopefully, there's some slower sections of current, but hopefully I can slow down, maybe have some more time to explore, maybe get into a few backcountry lakes, maybe take a little bit more time potentially to pan for gold, to fish, to look for things like some of the old cabins I've found, cook up some interesting meals and that. But I'm sure there'll be times still when I have to push, I have to make distance. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's a very remote river again. So I have to access it by Mayo Yukon. I'm flying in there on a float plane. I'm paddling the river and a ways, and then I'm getting picked up by a float plane again because the river is just that remote to paddle to the next road and then get a vehicle shuttle makes it more logistically challenging and much longer. It is hard for sure to know what just happened in my family and to not have literally canceled this trip. But these trips are so important to me. I also film them for my YouTube channel, and thanks to people like all of you, you watch my YouTube videos, and I make ad revenue from the YouTube ads on there. So I do make money from doing these trips, which is important because this is my full-time job, is being an adventurer, creating films, creating other content, all these things, presenting live chats, etc., etc., etc. So yeah, super excited to get out there, and I can't wait. It's a new part of the Yukon I haven't explored, and if you can't tell, I love the Yukon. I love that remote mountain wilderness. So yeah, I guess also one of the other things that I mentioned I was going to talk about too was I get a lot of comments on my YouTube channel saying we want to see more family stuff. Well, we have a big family adventure in the works. We're talking about something pretty special here. But first, I just wanted to mention a couple things you can expect to see on my channel. You might have seen some of my other posts on social media or my just photo posts on YouTube about some of the things I've been up to. So I haven't unfortunately had a chance to edit that because of the family stuff going on. But you can expect to see an awesome video of Tori, the kids, our dog North, and I heading back to the water access campsite where we camped in episode 3 of our Nat Geo TV and Disney Plus show, Home in the Wild. So we went back to that lake. We took a motorboat this time, and I managed to haul the boat up some swift current, more or less a rapid. Tori wasn't too stoked about it at first, but we accessed it a more remote part of the river because of that. Got into some great fishing. This was the bass opener. Headed back to the campsite that we'd stayed at, and lots of fun there. Did some couple different things there. Cooked up some food, went for a swim, and then got stuck in a hammering storm after seeing some wildlife. And then we continued on with some of the planting here. We grow food here on our property, not a massive amount, but a decent amount. And my three sisters' gardens are doing great this year. That's corn, beans, and squash. The Three Sisters. It's a traditional indigenous way, age-old indigenous way of growing those foods. They all complement each other. They all complement each other. I'll share some more of that in the upcoming video. I had to jump in to do a bunch of editing on spring trips and other things. So Tori took over the lion's share of the planting and made a beautiful little space up there where we're growing. We also had another big project going on here because Tori wanted to level the place up. Our property is very sloping, which is good because we don't have to worry about getting flooded from the river. However, sometimes when you're sitting out by the fire, you're kind of sitting on an angle. So Tori did a project to make things a lot more comfortable there, and it got pretty challenging. She dealt with some heavy rain to try to get the job done. So check that out. I also did a boys fishing trip where I actually bombed up a set of rapids driving my motorboat instead of rushing rapids to get into a good fishing spot. My friends thought I was kind of crazy. Check that out as well. So yeah, a couple upcoming things like that, maybe a little bit different than some of my other content, but camping, family, fishing, adventure, and some homesteading related stuff too. And then I want to to get everybody hyped up about my new upcoming series, film series in the Yukon, a 14-day adventure. What I want to do before, it probably won't come out until after I've left. I leave like the end of next week. But what I want to do is I want to showcase some of my best content and share a bunch of my stuff from the Yukon that I've done in the past back to back, just to show you some of that beautiful country and get you hyped up for this next Yukon adventure. And I also wanted to talk about our show Home in the Wild on Nat Geo TV and Disney Plus. The show is now live on Disney Plus US and Disney Plus Canada. I think you can still see it in the new to Disney Plus box, and also if you click on the Nat Geo portion of Disney Plus, you can find Home in the Wild, or you can just search it. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the show, I think you can still watch reruns too on Nat Geo at 10 in the States and ET and 9 p.m. ET here in Canada. But for those of you who aren't familiar, the show more or less follows our lives and more focuses on our family, where we live here in a rural part of Ontario, and the adventures that we get up to as a family. My son Wesley has a rare neurological syndrome called FOXG1, and he is disabled. He has disabilities. That are very challenging for him, and we still get out there with him with our young son Hudson as well, and we see how much being in nature helps Wesley's development, and we try to get out there with him as much as possible. A lot of the time we share that content on YouTube as well, and a lot of it is we're doing canoe trips, and we're looking for a rural property to buy. Somewhere water access, somewhere that's pretty remote, and we're looking to build a cottage or an off-grid cabin, a camp, and spend our summers there, and maybe spend more and more time there. So if anybody has a remote property that they know of, a water access property that is in eastern Quebec or northern Ontario. Let me know. Shoot me a note if you can. Message me on Instagram. It's at JB Adventurer on Instagram, and it's at Jim Baird Adventurer on Facebook. So yeah, I would be interested to hear if anybody has a heads up on a property. Tough to find the right place nowadays. Things have gone up in price and all that, but we're willing to drive a distance, so that would be pretty cool. And the show, filming the show, we're doing the same kind of things that we always kind of do on the show, except we have really, really, really good camera people. And this is National Geographic. right? So they are super authentic. They don't mess around. They have some of the best people in the world that are capturing this. It's produced by Original Productions as well, which is who did Deadliest Catch and a bunch of other really famous shows. So we're working with some really good people. Challenging for sure, to especially the first season, to sort of find a way for this film crew to follow us into some of these really remote spots. They had to get really creative with how they're going to shoot it, how they're going to mount canoes on the boats, how they're going to paddle, etc., etc., etc. A lot of bugs to work out. They did some trial runs and figured out how to way to do it to make it interesting and authentic. There was a lot of long days out there, and we were kind of worried, this was going to be too much for the kids. It's already a lot of work. Anybody that's done backcountry camping with little kids, anybody that just has little kids in a house knows it's a lot of work, let alone traveling with them in remote areas like this. And it was a lot of work to do this, because the days took longer when we're shooting than if we weren't shooting. No doubt about it. And longer than if we were shooting it ourselves, for sure. And that made some challenges. But at the end of the day, it was actually, the kids were fine. The kids were good. I think it was a great experience for them. It was a lot, like at times were a lot. When they were here, we were shooting non-stop for a month straight. And that, there was people in our house, filming us eating breakfast, filming us packing for our trips, filming us chatting, doing all kinds of different things. They weren't, sticking a camera in our face every minute, by the way, or by any means, but it was, it was a lot. And we kind of started getting used to it almost as time went on. Overall, me and Tori were surprised. I think it was just a good experience for the kids to have kind of this other interaction with other people. Probably Hudson has no idea. He's probably not even going to remember any of this. And one day we'll show it to him and tell him about it. It was, now, albeit good for the kids, at times it was, pretty exhausting for Tori and I, having to take on the challenges of this film production, and also the challenges of a trip itself. And I was working as a producer in the trip planning, the logistics planning, sort of helping the crew. But when I was on the trip, I didn't really have anything to do with that, because they wanted to capture me doing things for real, focusing on what I would do, what I typically do, as opposed to worrying about the production. So yeah, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot more moving parts than most people would think. For example, they had a person whose full-time job was to just organize memory cards. And I don't know anybody that's done YouTube or done filming and done these long trips. You have tons of full memory cards, and you misplace one, you start to freak out, you can't find the footage, you're going back through it. Did I format it? Did I lose it? What's going on? All these kind of things. They just had somebody full-time. He didn't come into the field with us, but full-time doing that, which is how seriously they take it. But if you haven't seen it, some really amazing content, some great adventures that we got up to with the kids, checking out some beautiful places, and got up to a lot of fun along the way. And actually, you can see some of that content where we traveled down the French River as a family on our YouTube channel. So the film crew filmed a bunch of that trip, and then we actually went on our way without the crew as well, and filmed a trip on the French River. You can see on my channel, it's called Wild Family, which is pretty cool. So we don't know for sure. Everybody keeps asking, Jim, there's only 4 episodes. Yes, there's only 4 episodes so far. Everybody keeps asking me, Jim, Tori, are there going to be more episodes? Will there be another season? Well, I guess the answer is to that right now. Unfortunately, we don't know. There's been some shakeups. Disney owns Nat Geo TV, and Disney, right after we finished our show, they ended up getting a new CEO, and the new CEO said, okay, well, let's not order any more shows until we see how the first season performed. So we're basically just waiting back for numbers, for ratings on the first 4 episodes, and even if they do great, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to make more. For sure, they might decide we're changing to another direction. All kinds of things can happen that are totally out of our hands. However, I think there's a good chance that you're going to see more, and maybe even a lot more. There's been some really positive feedback from the show already. I think it'd be cool if they came back and filmed some of the stuff that we're going to be getting up to this winter. We have some pretty interesting adventures and things planned for this winter to do as a family. So yeah, I think that would be cool. It'd be definitely different challenges than the first one, but then it takes, of course, a while for the content for everything they filmed to get edited down and made into this masterpiece that Nat Geo is so famous for doing. So stay tuned. Check back on my channel. I'll give announcements on when the next episodes might be. And I'll also share more about how we're doing, what we're doing, and how my son Wesley with Fox G1 syndrome, how his development is going. It's definitely improved since the show. He isn't walking yet, but we're hopeful that he will be doing better. And you can also check out my video, which will be up next Thursday, which will show us going back to the same campsite that we were at for episode 3 of our show Home in the Wild. So lots of exciting stuff there. We're going to share more family stuff. We're going to share this fall. One of the things we're going to be doing not even this fall, but late August, September, we're going to be checking out a lot of remote properties within about a 2 to 5 hour drive of our place in Northern Ontario, and potentially out as far as Thunder Bay too. And then our adventure is going to continue moving west. We're looking at going out to BC and doing a 10-day canoe trip in the mountains in British Columbia. So stay tuned. I'll share some more info on exactly where we're going, but it's pretty epic. It's off the Alaska Highway, and I'll share more of that in the future. I don't want to give everything away just now, and we're still firming up plans on exactly where we're going to go to. Let's see, what else was I going to talk about today? Lots of exciting stuff. Coming up on my YouTube channel, look back at previous Yukon adventures, get milk. This is my shopping list. Just kidding. I guess, I was going to talk a little bit too about expedition prep in general. I'm deep in the final stages of expedition prep, and actually I'm pretty far behind, which is concerning me. Fortunately, I have a lot of experience that which really helps me speed things up a lot. But the fact that I'm filming everything is a big deal. Like I bring a solar setup, and my solar cable that I had wasn't working properly, and that freaked me out because I don't have time to get a new one before I'm leaving, and I kind of semi-panic, but then managed to figure it out using some pieces from another solar system. I have a solar system from another charging solar panel, and I got it working. So there's a lot of stuff like that, but what I've already done is the main foundation of the adventure, which is figuring out the logistics. So a lot of these trips, the logistics can be challenging. Planes, trains, and automobiles, and boats. More than just planes, trains, and automobiles. For example, anyone who watched my expedition series Beyond the Height of Land with my brother and I, where we paddled across much of northern Manitoba. We went up the Barrington River, over the Height of Land, into the South Seal, to the Seal, all the way to Hudson Bay. And was 25 days just on the water paddling. the logistics were quite challenging. We couldn't get a float plane out of Thompson, Manitoba, which would be the easiest way to do it. Drive to Thompson, take a float plane in, more expensive charter. So what we had to do is we had to leave our vehicle in Thompson, then we had to get someone to drive us up a very, very remote gravel or pretty much dirt and mud road to a place called Leaf Rapids, but there's no float plane base in Leaf Rapids. So then we had to pay somebody, a bush pilot from a place called Snowshoe Lake to fly to meet us at Leaf Rapids and then fly us a relatively short flight up into the Barrington River system and then fly back. Then we paddled the full route. We made sure we didn't get lost. We were crossing massive lakes and all that, navigated the route. Then when we get to Hudson's Bay, we had to meet a boat that we chartered out of Churchill, Manitoba. That boat picked us up, and it was weather permitting. They can't pull up on shore. You have to paddle out to the boat. It's choppy. There's polar bears everywhere, beluga whales everywhere. Just epic place. But you can get windbound for many days, miss your boat, miss your train, which was the next step of this adventure. Then we took the train. I think it was about an 8-hour long ride or more, all the way from Churchill, Manitoba, which has no winter road and doesn't connect with any roads, back to Thompson, where we left our vehicle. And there's that train that operates likely at a large loss. And, so planes, trains, automobiles, and boats was how it happened. So I've got all that figured out. I fly to Whitehorse, Yukon. I drive to Mayo. I take a shuttle offered by Up North Adventures, who I've been working with on these Yukon paddling trips. They also do winter stuff, by the way, Up North Adventures. They also rent snowmobiles, do snowmobile tours, ice fishing, all kinds of stuff. So if you're looking at doing an adventure out of the Whitehorse area, check out Up North Adventures. The owner's Mark. He's a really good guy. So shout out to Up North. And so I go there. I pick up my canoe. So you're essentially renting or buying a canoe on these trips. And sometimes it can be challenging to find the right one. Does it have a spray deck? Do they have balancer and airbags? Do you need to bring your own paddles? Do you need to bring your own spray deck? All these kinds of things. In this case, I do need to bring my own spray deck, but I'm managing to find an outfitted Novacraft 15-foot Prospector in Tough Stuff Expedition, which is a really good rugged expedition grade material. Then I drive to Mayo, which is about 5 hours. I fly in to the headwaters of the Heart River. I paddle the Heart. I get picked up by a float plane. I fly back to Mayo and drive to Whitehorse. Not too challenging, but the charter flights can be expensive, especially solo. You do it with two people, it cuts the prices in half, obviously. And if you go with more people, right now what I'm able to do is I'm able to jump on a ride from Whitehorse to Mayo with a bunch of other people that are heading there at the same time. So that reduces the cost. So there's different things you can do to get costs down, but you want to do these larger than life adventures. There's quicker and more expensive ways to do them, and there's cheaper and much longer ways to do them. If you're gonna do it like that. So that's kind of the best way to sort of sum that up. So one of the challenges I find with doing trips like this is the challenge of taking a commercial airline. You really got to do your due diligence and look up what are their baggage rulings. Okay, so some airlines don't let you take a bag that's heavier than I think 60 pounds, or Air Inuit won't let anything that's over a certain amount of weight has to be sent cargo. So if, let's say, you're flying WestJet or Air Canada and then you're transferring over to Air Inuit in, say, Edmonton, you have to go pick up your bags and then check them in at Air Inuit. But then Air Inuit say, well, this bag's too heavy. We can't take this. This has to go cargo. Well, can I fly cargo? Well, cargo's not available till tomorrow. That actually happened to me before, and I hyperventilated and pleaded with them, and they managed to go way out of their way to help me out, which probably I just got lucky and somebody there was really helpful or managed to bend the rules, right? So yeah, you really got to look into these things. You got to weigh your bags. If you're going to start doing these, adventures where you're taking commercial flights, get a good scale. That's a great idea. Also, it's not the best idea to just pack your dry bags and just check them. Food barrels like this, food barrels like this, not so bad, but they will almost like implode when you're on a plane because of the pressure. This one has a little tab you can put here because these are airtight. You can put a little tab through there that breaks the seal, allows air to get into it. They come with little tabs for that purpose. For that purpose specifically, you can see here the old airline stickers that are on here. I think this is the one that I had to ship priority cargo from Air Inuit because I couldn't get it on the flight because it was overweight. And another expense that you're going to have to remember is that you pay over baggage fees, and then there's an overweight fee. So you also have to pay for traveling with a firearm. That's an extra $100. And then a lot of these items also have to go through oversize, which means you have to check them. You have to fill out a form if you're traveling with a firearm. It has to be packed to spec in a lock case. Some airlines want the ammo in that lock case, obviously gun unloaded unless you're an idiot. Some airlines want it in another case with your other baggage. You got to check that out. Then after you check in, you have to move over to oversize. You have to wait, and then they scan your bags as they stand there one by one. Well, what ends up happening is that a lot of the time, people in the airlines at the oversize, they're just scanning golf clubs and shit, right? Like they're not looking at, expedition outdoor gear. So they start to, what is this? What is this? What's that? Are you allowed that? And they stop and they take you have to pull stuff out and show them that this is okay, and well, that's just this, or this is just that. You know what I mean? Typically, I take my camera gear in a Pelican case or in a Nook case as my carry-on, and any sort of sensitive kind of camera gear, I don't check that for sure. But yeah, everything else you got to check. You got to make sure that you get it. It can be pretty stressful. Again, I like to use like big hockey bags. They're really good. So you have your dry bag that you're going to take on your canoe expedition. But it's got all these straps, and the straps can get stuck on things. I've had the straps rip clean off. Then you get to your trip starts and you got no straps on your bag, and that can be an issue. So what I do is I take those, I put them in hockey bags, and then I can add a couple other things to hockey bags. I stand on a scale with them, weigh myself and the bag, weigh myself, subtract my weight, then you got the weight of your bag. And you're going to have to pay, most of them allow like 2 check bags. We can have 2 check bags, but if those 2 check bags are overweight, that's like, $60 each, then every other bag is like more than $50 each, we'll say. I think it's more. And then if those bags are also overweight, then you pay an overweight fee on top of the over baggage fee. So you're probably looking at so that, let's say that's $400, right? Then if you change airlines, which you often do when you're flying in the north, because Air Canada, for example, WestJet, they don't fly to Ulukakto, Northwest Territories. So you're flying to Yellowknife or Whitehorse, and then you're changing to First Air or First Air I don't know exists anymore, or Air Inuit, or a smaller airline, and you have to recheck in your bags, and then you get dinged for over baggage again. So you're looking at like $800 potentially per person. Might not be that much. Depends on how you're traveling. With 2 people, with 2 people, you probably, if you gotta swap your bags over twice, you can be looking at about $800 between the 2 of you. Then again on the way back. So that's a cost that I did in the past. I was like, oh my god, this trip's already so expensive, and then it's like, oh my god, we have to pay just like hundreds and hundreds of dollars more. I didn't realize. So just do the math, figure that out, get a good scale, get some hockey bags. You can get hockey bags for cheap, typically at like a used sporting goods store. There was a place here in Southern Ontario I went to. I think there's one in Sudbury. There's one in Barrie, Toronto, whatever. It's called Play It Again Sports. They have just like you know, use hockey bags or just hockey bags for cheap. You know, sometimes I've traveled, especially for winter trips, if I'm going to be snowmobiling or pulling sledges, I travel with Rubbermaid roughneck totes. I even strap them to the top of my vehicle in the winter. They're Rubbermaid, but they're pliable, so they don't crack. Especially when it's cold, they bend. You can drill holes through the handles and zip tie them shut. That's a good thing to travel. A lot of people in the north travel with those. When you have, what also makes it more expensive is when you can't buy a round trip. So on some of these expeditions, you know, you're flying to, like, for example, when my brother and I paddled the Cudjoe River on Victoria Island in the Arctic archipelago, we flew to Cambridge Bay, flew out by float plane, got dropped off, paddled the river, paddled the coast, finished in Uluwatu, and then flew back out of Uluwatu. So anything we left at the beginning, we couldn't pick up at the end. So you can't like rent canoes and drop them off where you got them. So we had to take a pack boat, which is a folding canoe. And you know, that's the kind of situation where you might find a canoe, you might be able to buy one. Sometimes canoe parties will cache a canoe or cache canoes on the tundra on a float plane pilot might know where they are. You start asking around, you'd be surprised what you can come up with sometimes, and then you could give it away or sell it, split the cost between the people you're doing the trip with, and stuff like that in the end. So those are the big things. Figuring out your dates, you know, bust out the calendar. Nobody likes busting out a calendar, you know. And you gotta hold yourself down. You gotta figure out when all this is gonna work out, and those logistics, paying for them, funding it. That's a nuts and bolts. So right now, I still haven't printed off my maps. I have a good. You can order your maps too, which is great. However, I typically like to order my large scale topographic maps because they have all the map data on them. And if you're using a compass, it's really good to have that declination diagram, which will tell you the difference between true north and magnetic north and grid north and true north. Without getting into too much more detail, some people hopefully might understand what I'm talking about. However, those maps, those declination diagrams, and that calculation was done at the time those maps were printed, which is typically after they did aerial surveys in like the 70s, right? And then there's some more datum that says, you know, to calculate the movement of the magnetic North Pole, add X amount of degrees per year starting from this year. So you can calculate that. However, you can just jump onto the .gov.ca Canada site, even just Google Canada Declination Calculator. You can punch in your long lats for the area you're in, which you can do by just hovering it over it in like Garmin mapping software, even Google Earth software if you zoom right in, because it's not very accurate, Google Earth, but it doesn't have to be exact to give you an idea of the declination, which is the difference again between magnetic north and true north. And then I just write that right on the maps I print off. I have a laser jet printer, so I can waterproof them with Thompson's water seal, and or you know, print on tear non-tear paper or whatever it's called. So I do have that option. So I invested in a better printer to do this, and then I have better declination info than I would on those traditional maps. And you know, I used to print them off on digital-topo-maps.com. I can't do it anymore now. I'm doing it from the Canadian government website. And I'm not a huge fan of it because the labels are so huge. So they'll say like, you know, Cameron Island, and the label will be this huge when you print it off, and then you can't see any of the details on the map because of the label. Also, I haven't figured out how to have it show a military grid. And when I'm traveling out there, I use the military grid on the map to know how much further I have to go. And then as I'm notating my maps, I count every 5 or 10 squares, and I write down how many kilometers I have. So I always know I have this many kilometers till I'm done. So I can just look and be like, okay, 4 days left, X amount of kilometers per day, I'll make it, boom, I can do that calculation while I'm in the field. So I'm not a huge fan of the topographic maps available online, the format of them, but they're going to be good enough for this expedition. They're still fine, they're not perfect. Also comms. I've been just carrying a Garmin InReach. Actually, I carry something that's a Garmin InReach and a Garmin handheld GPS, a 2-in-1. It's called a Garmin 66i, and that has an SOS button. So if SHIT hits the fan, you can pop that SOS button, and it'll send out a beacon to PLB, a personnel locating beacon. It also has two-way text messaging capabilities via the satellites, two-way email capabilities. I can also post to Facebook with it as well. So follow me on Facebook. I'll be posting updates from the field. I can't read comments. I can't post pictures, but I can post, hey, I made it today, saw 2 wolves, caught a tank laker, camped by a waterfall, everything's well. Something like that. People can click the link. They can see exactly where I am on a topographic map. Pretty cool, right? So I'm going to be doing that. And I haven't been carrying a sat phone as often. And I think the reason is because the InReach I can just keep in my pocket, keep it tethered to my belt. If I dump and I lose my canoe and everything, I still have the InReach on me. Where it's unlikely that you're going to carry a satellite phone in your pocket while you're out there, right? So that's what I choose to do. Better to have a sat phone and an InReach, yes, but satellite phones can get expensive. And if you don't have really heavy logistics to your trip or any business or other things you got to take care of where you need a phone, you probably don't really need one. Also, a phone doesn't have a PLB, so in some ways InReach is better. The only thing is that if you're using the 66i and you're running the GPS, I typically don't run it. I just turn it on kind of once in a while. But if you're running it, you're running the batteries on your GPS, which means you're also running your batteries out on your InReach, and that's your kind of lifeline, right? So I just think if you have a separate InReach, you don't use it, and you have your GPS that you keep recharging, that might be safer, but then you're probably not going to carry both of them on you. So I think the best thing to do is if you're going to run with a 66i, this 2-in-1 device, just carry an extra power bank and a charging cable with you, and you'll be good to go. And then you can be charging it while you're on the move, or you charge it at camp, and battery life is good. So yeah, that's a good thing. So yeah, I got to do my maps. I got to make sure my maps are uploaded into my GPS. I got to make sure my InReach is working. All my camera gear's good. Paddles, I'm bringing paddles. Life jacket, helmet, air balancer, and airbags, throw bags. Double check everything. Double check with the float plane company. Double check with Up North Adventures. Check out my baggage restriction, baggage weight. Double check that. Weigh all my bags. Pack everything. Probably run to town, buy hockey bags. Notate my maps. Do all my food planning. Organize my survival kit. Organize all my fishing stuff. Hopefully I have time to fly my fly fishing stuff. I really like to bring a robust survival kit on these adventures. I have a men's journal article up that's called, forget what it's called. I think it's just called Wilderness Survival Kit. If you Google Wilderness Survival Kit, Jim Baird Men's Journal, it'll come up. And I've really done what I think is a pretty comprehensive job of sharing what I think is like the best freaking survival kit you can bring out there. Now, the only problem is if you have one that's too huge, it's like a backpack. You don't want to carry it. So, I carry mine in a fanny pack, except I don't call them a fanny pack. I call them a survival pack out there because it's cooler. And because it's cooler, I'll be more likely to want to wear it. And what I do when I'm on the river is I keep that survival pack on me at all times. And that way, no matter what, if I become separated from my canoe because I tip in a rapid or there's a horrific storm blows up, and I'm separated from my canoe, where all my gear is, right? So when you're out there on these adventures, sure, you have a canoe, you have all this gear, this survival gear to camp and everything. But what if you dump in a rapid, your canoe rips around a boulder, smashes in half, all your gear's lost down the waterfall, or your canoe's just irretrievably pinned underwater under a boulder, you can't get your canoe, you can't get your gear, essentially you can't find your canoe, there's all kinds of scenarios that can happen. All you're gonna have is what is on your body. And I remember one time when I dumped on the Hess River, and I became immediately separated from my canoe. Usually I have a throw bag that's tethered to my canoe. If I dump, I quickly grab the throw bag. I got the canoe on the end of a rope. I fight to get that to shore into a side eddy, wrap the rope around a tree if there's any current, it ferries into shore. Little elbow grease to say the least, but a little fear, but no problems. Well, this time on the Hess, I just lost my canoe and I thought it was pinned underwater and never get it back. Turned out with a heck of a lot of interesting stuff happening. After a lot of interesting stuff happening, I did get it back, but when I got out of the water and I was separated, I couldn't see my canoe anywhere. I had this survival pack on me. I had my inReach on me. I don't put a knife or multi-tool in my survival pack. I keep them on my belt because what's the point? You're not going to lose them on your belt. What's the point of keeping extra ones in your survival pack, right? So, knife, multi-tool, inReach, basic survival stuff, because I'm wet at this point. I don't have any other clothes. I don't have a proper tarp. I have a Mylar blanket. All of a sudden, and it's something like, at that point, it was 20 miles through the mountains to get to the Cannell Trail, which is an abandoned World War II pipeline trail, which is very few people ever travel on in of itself, right? So, and that was the least remote place of the entire adventure I was on, right? So you got to realize that what I realized very quickly is this robust survival pack I thought I was assembling before leaving on this adventure very much started to seem like absolutely nothing, not even close to being good enough. And that was a very scary feeling. Fortunately, I was okay. And do I think I would have been okay? I think because of my experience, I probably would have been able to walk out of there on eating berries and lighting fires and sleeping under spruce trees with my Mylar blanket. And I think I would have been a hell of an adventure, but I wouldn't have had any video footage to film it. So that would have sucked. I would have had to write an article with drawn pictures, I guess. Anyways, so so very scary. So pack a good survival kit. Always have a backup plan. Always plan for the worst and hope for the best. That's why planning is so important. People say, Jim, you're so fearless. You do these things. Honestly, I'm not fearless. I'm terrified to go into these. Maybe not terrified, but I'm scared to go into these things, and I'm not cocky about them. I worry about all the things that could potentially go wrong, and I meticulously plan for those things. And as soon as you start to cut corners, that's when you could die, in these remote areas. But if you plan everything okay, you're in a remote area, technically, sometimes when I'm in the Arctic, and you get some serious weather and stuff, but technically, you're not necessarily in more danger than on your home river. You can run into danger on your home river if you're not prepared, right? But the remoteness, if something does go wrong, adds a whole lot of interesting elements to the predicament you might find yourself in. So, I definitely take a good survival kit when I'm out there. Weighing your bags, keep all that in line for the airline. And this all sounds like a lot. You don't got to do it all right away. You take your time, you make a list, you check it twice, you find out who's naughty and nice. No, wait a minute, that's a Christmas song. No, you just you make your list and you check through your things, you make some calls, you start planning this months in advance. The amount of time, I shouldn't even say this, but if you're experienced, the amount of time it takes to plan a trip nowadays that we have the internet, we have more outfitters, more trip reports online than ever before. It can be a lot faster to plan a trip on a river that other people have paddled before, and so you don't need as much time as you would have at one time to plan these expeditions, that's for sure. Take the time and plan properly. Oh Jesus, already 10 to 10, but I promise we do a little bit of Q&A. I'll do another maybe 10, 15, I don't know, maybe half hour. We'll see how it goes. Some Q&A. So would love to hear everybody's questions. First of all, everybody, thanks a lot for tuning into this. I didn't have a video up this week, but I just wanted to share with you what happened, what we're all going to be up to, and that kind of stuff. And I'd love to answer your questions. If you want to talk about expedition prep, another thing I didn't touch on was using barges. Northern Transportation Company Limited, they actually went out of business, but barging companies at Hay River, barging companies at Montreal to get canoes, other gear up to the Arctic. If you plan in advance, you can move gear around and stuff like that. You want to ask anything about logistics, northern logistics, expedition planning, filming your trips. If you have any questions about our show, Home in the Wild, please shoot, or just about any other stuff to do with camping, adventure, or stuff you see on my channel. Shoot. I don't have Tori fielding questions this time. But I got an iPad here, so if you see me looking away here, I'm just reading this iPad, and I'll try to see the questions that pop up here. Jim, you are a loser. Hey! Just kidding, that's not a question. Sometimes I get some interesting ones, though. I have a sat phone, saved me once. Charlie Smith. Yeah, good call, Charlie. Could never say anything bad about that, that's for sure. Thank you for sharing all your adventures with us. You're welcome. Don't forget your TP, brother. LOL. I'm not gonna lie, I very rarely remember TP. I often just use dead, dry leaves, even snowballs. Less litter, and moss is a big favorite of mine. But when you're traveling in places where people are using the campsites all the time, and there's a treasure chest, I would recommend bringing it. Favorite gym line of all time, talking about a shotgun and bear, shoot him right in the DICK. Every shot in the DICK. I don't know if anybody's seen that, but that's in my Hess River Yukon Wild documentary. I'll try to get to some questions here instead of comments. Do you only use Warner paddles? I was actually I like the wood paddles. I really like the look of the wood paddles. I like the traditionalness of the wood paddles. Everything you're using, although the canoe, backpacks, even tump lines, paddle, obviously, all these things are traditional things. That the materials are all different. So I thought, well, at least I have one thing that's still a traditional material. And I really, like Warner paddles, but they actually reached out to me and said, "Hey Jim, do you want to work with us?" I said, "We'll see." They weren't, paying me anything, but they sent me a couple paddles, and I was just like, "These are amazing." Like going back to some of my lower end wooden paddles, I felt like I was paddling with a tree trunk after paddling with some of these carbon fiber paddles. Do I only use Warner paddles? No, I don't. I've actually shifted over my whitewater paddle. I really like the Warner Bandit, but the Warner Bandit that's in fiberglass is my expedition whitewater paddle. Right now, I'm using an H2O C2 paddle, I believe it's called. It's got an even wider blade. It's got a wooden T-grip. The shaft is carbon fiber. It's a little heavier than the Warner one. I'd say about as durable, if not more durable than the Warner carbon fiber one. T-grip's a little better. Wider paddle blade, really awesome paddle. And I'm bringing, so that's H2O. Check out H2O paddles. They're a Canadian company, actually, all made in Canada, in I think Toronto, in the Toronto area. H2O paddles are really cool. And I'm bringing also a Warner paddle. It's called a Warner Journey, is my flat water paddle. And what I do is I'll often bring a flat water paddle that could double as a whitewater paddle. My flat water paddle is shorter, but instead of bringing a flat water paddle, something like an otter tail that is really nice to paddle with in flat water, I'll bring a flat water paddle that is a little wider, so I could still use it in whitewater if I have to. So yeah, I'm bringing an H2O whitewater paddle and a Warner Journey. So no, I don't only use Warner paddles. What type of MSR tent do you have? So I'm using what's called the MSR Remote 3. Very good tent. It's got carbon fiber poles. It's a 4-season mountaineering tent. Anybody looking at what kind of tent to buy, the answer is a mountaineering tent. If it says mountaineering in it, it's freaking good. It's going to handle heavy rain and you're not going to get wet. It's got a fly that comes right down to the ground. It's got systems for guying it down so it can take like blasting wind, probably more than you're going to experience on 95% of your canoe expeditions, even in the Arctic. For backup, you can bring an extra pole. You can bring pole sheaths where if your pole cracks, it's like a sheath that slips over the pole and you can fix it. And yeah, mountaineering. I think the MSR Remote 3 is probably the best tent I've ever had, save for the Sierra Designs Stretch Dome line. I think the Stretch Dome AST, I had one with a huge vestibule. I didn't like it as much. I think they were a little better, but Sierra Designs got out because they just really tightly did up. Like when you did them up, that dome was super tight, almost like a drum. They didn't budge. Yeah, MSR, they got carbon fiber poles, so for the size of the tent, it's super light. As far as I'm concerned, it's the best tent. I would say somebody might have a different, Sierra Designs, they went a different direction, and they came out with some new models that were kind of, I don't want to say weird. I didn't try one, but I don't think they really caught on the way they were hoping, and you can't get one of those stretch domes anymore. So yeah, a Remote 3 MSR, bomb-proof freaking tent. What's your favorite style beer? Cheers. I like a beer that you could drink a lot of. You hear people say that. So, like I like your IPAs and stuff like that. Not super heavy, like 8% IPA or super citrusy, but I like a good IPA, but I only like to have like 2 of those. I still like them. So yeah, my favorite kind of beer is like a cold, crisp lager that's like refreshing. Some craft beer, obviously, Muskoka Brewery has sponsored. They're not sponsoring me anymore. Maybe I'll work with them again in the future, but they're sponsoring some of my live chats. That's a craft brewery. They have some really good bevies. Their Pilsner, their Tread Lightly is probably one of the best light beers out there. But in general, I don't know if I'm like a massive craft beer fan. Microbrewery fan, definitely. But I mean, it's just hit and miss, right? So some craft beers are amazing, but it's like I usually go for like my favorites are like the imports. I really like Moosehead, but I go for the imports just because those are the brands. I know them; they've been around. I know what their taste like. Where if it's like a new craft beer, I don't know if I'm gonna like it or not for sure, right? So yeah, typically I just like a good, refreshing lager is what I would say. Does Paddle Like a Girl have merch? My wife would love it. Hey Tor, where can they buy Paddle Like a Girl merch? Okay, so my wife Tori is going to add a link in the comments and let you know where you can buy Paddle Like a Girl merchandise, t-shirts, all that kind of stuff. It's got the logo on it, you name it. So yeah, check it out. You can probably Google paddlelikeagirl.com or go to paddlelikeagirl.com. You can probably buy it off that website. And my wife Tori's gonna pop a link in the comments so you can get some merch. Is it cheaper to drive or fly north if you have time? I would say it depends because there's areas that you can't drive to in the north because you're off the road system. Like for example, you can't drive to northern Quebec. You can't drive to Nunavut. You can drive to like Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, but then in the summer that's about it, like Hay River and stuff like that. If you're going to northern Ontario, you're going to have to transfer to fly to a small town. So it's probably going to be cheaper to drive if you're on the road system. See, the thing is that flights, when you start getting into the north, if you're talking about the north, like north of 60 or, Arctic Quebec, for example, it's cheaper to fly to Iceland from Montreal than it is to fly from Montreal to Kuujjuaq, which is in the same province. It's cheaper to fly from Montreal to Sydney, Australia, than it is to fly from Montreal to Kuujjuaq, which is in the same province. In fact, unfortunately, Canada is one of the most expensive countries in the world to travel in as a Canadian within the borders of your own country. It's one of the most expensive. And I think that's a real shame because people see those cheaper tickets to go to all these awesome places. But Canadians, because of that, don't get to explore their own country as much as they should be able to and realize the various cultures that are here, the amazing bits of history that they might just stumble across like I have, and the varying landscapes, etc., 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 that we have here. So yeah, if there's roads and you're going to the north and you have a lot of baggage with you, it's going to be cheaper to drive. I would say 9 times out of 10, depending on where you're coming from. I mean, if you're driving, from South America and taking a ferry around the Darien Gap, that might be an exception. Good mountain tent is all you will never ever need or buy. Mountaineering tent. I agree, Dave. This is Canada. It's all Crown land made. Dave Myers. Question. Do you still make pemmican? Yeah, I do actually. I haven't had enough time to make much for my last trip. But yeah, I made a big batch of moose pemmican. I've made pemmican with deer venison, a ton of it with bison. For a while, I was making quite a bit of it and got pretty good at making the different kinds. But I guess maybe the novelty's worn off a little. I think also because of what's happened in my family, I just never got around to it because it's just something you get better and better at, and it gets more and more delicious. So yeah, I'm a little bummed that I'm probably not going to have enough time to make pemmican for this adventure because it works better and it's so much tastier than those little power bars that you take out there. So, but I have some jerky that I made and all that kind of stuff. Do you have any older brothers or sisters? Yeah, I have a brother named David. He's 10 years older than me. He's not so interested in all this outdoor stuff, but he's awesome. We're good buddies. Do you have or ever come across anything that made you go, holy shit, what was that? Forest people, save dead, serious question. Okay, so this guy's asking me if Bigfoot exists, if I've ever seen Bigfoot. Joe, I'm sorry to break it to you, buddy, but Bigfoot is not real, man. It's just not real. Bigfoot doesn't exist, and that's just the truth. UFOs are a heck of a lot more likely to exist than Bigfoot. Sorry, so no, I haven't come across anything like that. I still love you. Don't get mad at me. Okay. How do you not go insane from all the mosquitoes? That's a good question. I think that it's proven that some people are bothered more by mosquitoes than others. So there's some people give off certain scents that are more likely to attract mosquitoes. I heard that they're trying to develop like a pill that would help you sweat out, that would be natural, that would help you sweat out certain things that people who aren't as affected by mosquitoes sweat out naturally, and would increase those amounts. And to me, I'm swallowing bug spray. It sounds wrong. I carry Muskol, high DEET content. When the bugs are really bad, I use it. I don't use it very much in a year. On these bigger trips, I'll use it a fair amount, but most of the time I don't use it. And I think that has to do with just like what's in your head, right? Just being calm, and also just choosing that you're going to pretend, even if you have to pretend that the bugs aren't bothering you. And you're just going to have to meditate through it. Eventually, the mind is plastic and they will not bother you anymore. Just meditate through that stress. Fake that you don't care. I did that with forcing myself to clean the kitchen. Tori loves me a hell of a lot more. Eventually, my mind molded, reshaped, because it is plastic. It can move. And I started cleaning the kitchen more, because I love my wife that much, and it was challenging. So yeah, the same thing's true with mosquitoes. For example, I don't swell up anymore because I just, you have a lot of mosquito bites. My uncle told me once that if you just go into the woods in your undies and you just sit there and let hundreds of mosquitoes bite you, that it's like you make a deal with the mosquitoes, you give them that blood, and that they'll never bother you as much again. I know that sounds crazy. I did that when I was like 10 years old, and it seemed to work. For one, I don't actually swell up anymore from mosquito bites because you just get immune to them. It's funny though, when I went out west one time in Alberta, I started swelling up just because the mosquitoes, the anticoagulant that they put into you with their proboscis, I don't know, is before it's drinking your blood is a little bit different. So it took me a little while to get immune to that as well. But a lot of people, the mosquitoes, there's more in their mind than there are around them. So how many times have you seen a mosquito here and a mosquito here, and you see, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my god, the bugs are so bad. Like, calm down. You're a grown adult. You're acting like a psycho. Take a deep breath. Look around you. There's 3 mosquitoes around you. Let's continue having a fun time because there's only 3 mosquitoes, and it's not the end of the world. No offense to all you people who complain too much about the bugs. Love you all. Okay, eat garlic pills, Dave Brown saying. Garlic helps with the mosquitoes. Citrus helps with mosquitoes. You're better off to eat citrus than you are bananas, that's for sure. Bananas might attract them, so consider some of those things. Are you ever concerned about the wildlife? I mean, I think probably the wildlife's more concerned about me in general. And that's usually the case with everybody. But yeah, I think that I do have like a healthy fear of bears, and I prepare for it in a smart way. For example, when I'm camping solo in grizzly bear country, I don't, take the peanut butter jar into my tent. I take all my food far away. I don't make a mess when I'm cooking over the fire. I don't have I try not to necessarily cook right next to my tent. I'm clean with things. I clean the fish far away from camp. All those kind of things when I'm in grizzly bear country. And I think that's smart. So, you follow those steps, you don't have to really be scared. And, if it's your time, it's your time. You could, knock on wood, you could get in a car accident tomorrow too, completely blindsided out of nowhere. But once in a while, I'll be like walking along and I'll hear or see something and that I think might be like a bear stalking me or a predator, like a cougar. If you see on a loan, I was getting stalked by a cougar, and I'll realize what's happening and I'll be like, I'm absolutely terrified right now. Typically, I figure it out, it's not a threat, or in the case of the cougar, I managed to just scare it away, and I was okay. So yeah, I think the way to deal with that is just time in the bush. You go out there. I think Kevin Callan said this. Kevin Callan has a YouTube channel and he's an author. If you're not familiar with him, but he, I think it's called The Happy Camper. But he said, if you do a 10-day trip, you'll stop being afraid of bears, because after you haven't gotten eaten for 5 days, you'll realize, well, I'm probably going to be fine for another 5, and then after another 5, you're just like, man, I'm not scared of bears anymore. So I think that's the way to do it for sure. Okay, what else do we have here? What is your favorite camp stove? I don't think I have a favorite camp stove. Like for my Arctic trips, if I'm trying to like heat a small canvas tent, a double burner Coleman is great. Sure, they're bulky and heavy, but they're pretty bomb proof. And because they have that grill on top, you don't have to perfectly balance them and sit your pot on the snow, and the snow like melts. So then you have to like bring a board and put your stove on top of the board, and it just kind of turns to a pain in the butt. So having that grill in the winter for Coleman stove, if I'm using it to heat my tent in the Arctic, that's amazing. The naphtha gas stoves, you have to pump them. That's the one that take white gas or Coleman camping fuel. You have to pump them, light them, pump them again. That's a bit of a pain in the butt. Sometimes there's a huge flame and you got to turn it off, or if you overfill them, you can have problems. So that's a pain in the butt. However, they are pretty freaking bomb proof. I really like the Coleman single burner. You can get it right down to a simmer. You can get it ripping hot. They're way better to cook fish on. I also really like just the more inexpensive propane stoves. You have those little propane bottles. You got to learn how to refill those, or else you're just buying them and throwing them out. It's super wasteful. But yeah, those little propane bottles, because those you just turn on, I just light it, I stick it in the fire if there's already a fire going and I want to do something cooking on the side. Light it, like goes up, no hassle. But propane doesn't work well propane doesn't work well in the cold, and it's also impossible to get those jars. Same with isobutane canisters, which are also good. It's impossible to get those in the north. So at that point, you only can use a naphtha gas or Coleman camping fuel or white gas or whatever you call it. You can only use those naphtha gas stoves, and at the co-ops in the Arctic, you can actually get them for a pretty good price. It's the northern store charges you an arm and a leg, but it's one of the better deals going on in the far north. And so jet boils or the isobutane stoves. If I'm just only going to be using it for sure, and I know I'm going to, in a place where I'm just planning on cooking over the fire at night, all I want to do is have a stove to boil water in the morning. The jet boils are great. They blast boil your stuff. You make your coffee. You make your oatmeal, whatever, in the morning. Cook over your fire, but they're so intense in such a small spot. They're like terrible to cook on. You just waste all your gas, and like the middle of your fish is burnt and the outside is raw. So yeah, but they're easy to light and all that. So but yeah, keep in mind you can't buy that stuff in the far north. You can probably buy it in Whitehorse, but might be a little harder to come by. Yeah, you probably get it in Whitehorse, no problem. Isobutane, propane, but overall, I think best bet heavy, probably single burner. Something like the Whisper lights and those stoves. I've never been a huge fan of those, but for backpacking, definitely I would bring one of those. They're white gas stoves as well with a separate canister. MSR Whisper light. For me, they don't seem to throw out as much heat as the other ones though. So like it takes longer for your stuff to boil. The wind affects them more and stuff. For backpacking though, I would take one of those lighter stoves, like a Whisper light or a Firefly or something like that. They have the separate canister and a small thing like that. That's what I go with. Anyways, hope that helps. Thank you, Dixie, North Bay. Just cheers from North Bay. Stay safe in the Yukon. I believe it's Yeti breeding season. Miigwech. Chi Miigwech Dixie from North Bay. I'll stay clear of the Yetis. Let's see. What type of sleeping bag and bag do you like? I definitely am a fan of. Geez, it's hard to say. I think there's something to be said for just those like Thermarest foam ground pads because they have other uses. I use them to block the wind from my camping stove. I use them to sit on around the fire. You can even make a splint out of them. There's tons of uses for them. They don't pop, but I've been using an X-Ped down mat recently. I think I have one like an X-Ped down mat 9 long and wide. It's like more comfortable than my bed at home. But the problem is you got to be careful because they pop. If they do pop, you can patch them, but that's a pain in the butt. If they pop, if they tear, well, it's a little harder to patch. So, and you can't really bring them out of your tent and put them by your fire, and then bringing both is a little much. However, another great thing about those is they fold way down. So they fold down to like this big, where the foam ones, it's like big like this, right? But then again, they take more time to inflate, deflate, and pack away every morning when you're trying to break camp or when you're tired. Sometimes the last thing you want to do is kind of blow up or inflate this mat, right? So there's trade-offs, and to be honest with you, I'm on the fence on whether I'm going to take that or my Thermarest that I sleep on. But now that I'm getting a little older, shoulder's a little sore, hip gets a little sore here and there. It's nice to have that nice inflatable warm mat. I brought one of those in the Arctic. I also brought for my -40 sleeping bag in the Arctic, my Arctic trips. I brought a Bison Gore by Western Mountaineering. So good, so good. It inflates. It's super lofty. If the exterior of it rips a bit, it doesn't kind of hold in that puffy air. So you gotta be able to kind of like patch it. And then with that, if you put in a liner, you're getting down to like sleep outside at -50. I was sweating with the liner at like minus 35. Just that thin liner somehow adds way more R value, way more warmth to it. And for my other trips, I've been still using the same sleeping bag I've probably had for about 17 years. I typically go with a 4-season synthetic on trips like this, and honestly, almost every trip I go with a 4-season synthetic. It's like a Woods 4-season synthetic. It's nothing fancy at all. And what I do is I just like sleep with it open like a blanket. But there's been so many times, you know, especially on spring trips, guys are bringing 3 seasons, guys are bringing 2 seasons, and they just freeze their freaking butts off. You know what I mean? So yes, dead of the summer trip, backpacking trips, you don't need it. But you know, if I'm going to the north, I'm not bringing it down. I'm bringing a 4-season synthetic bag. If it's too hot, I just sleep with the thing open, and that's what I do. Somebody says 4 to 5 days is way more time you need. I think he's talking about 4 to 5 days to stop getting scared of bears. I did say you need a 10-day trip. I say with 4 or 5 days, say 5 days, you haven't been eaten yet, you're going to be less scared than on day 1, and then when you stay another 5, you get a lot less scared. That's you know, that I think there's some truth to that personally, but maybe some people it's more. But the point is, when you sleep out there more, when you have more time, and anything that you're afraid of that is, you know, like, I mean, I don't want to say not rational, but I mean, if you start to look up the amount of people that have been killed by bears in North America, it's like insanely low, like shockingly low for the most part. And so, you know, to be afraid of bears every time you go in the woods isn't really rational. So, you know, I mean, maybe some people have a phobia. If you have a phobia, like you're afraid of spiders, and you have arachnophobia, maybe it doesn't matter. You need some like hypnotism or something like that. You know, but usually what happens is the more time you do something you're afraid of, the more comfortable you get with it, and the less afraid you are. I mean, across the board. So I would say with that logic, if you're afraid of bears, you'll be less afraid of bears the more you go out. And that's really the only way to cure a fear of bears, is to face your fears. You know, doing some research would help too, looking up, well, how many bear attacks have there ever been in this area? Chances are the number you will find is 0. You know what I mean? That's going to make you feel better. Learning about it, educating yourself, all that really helps. What can I do to prevent bears from bothering me? What can I bring? What can I not bring? How can I store my food? Where can I store my food? Etc. Etc. All that will help. Maybe if you're really scared, you want to bring like a bear alarm fence or an electric fence or something like that. Even, you know, that might help. Most people don't do that. Bringing bear spray, bringing bear bangers, for sure. I would recommend doing that as well. So yeah, so those things. But yeah, get yourself out there, educate yourself. You'll be less afraid of bears. How big is your gear room? Is it organized or free for all? Yeah, my wife Tori did a little Instagram reel. Her Instagram page is at Tori, Tori, goes outside, at Tori goes outside. And she said, you know, I just want to come show you our gear room so you can check it out, see what we got going on down there. I built some shelves, and here it is, and it's just like trashed. And a lot of people found that really relatable. And I find a lot of people, I remember one time I was doing a trip with a couple guys, this guy Brad Jennings, who's got a known YouTuber. He has a YouTube channel called Explore the Backcountry, and he's showing up. Oh, maybe we can even head out tonight. And then I got everything ready. You know, this guy's coming. You know, I gotta get ready. Got to do my part, and you know, don't want to be behind schedule. And he showed up and like opened his door, and like a tackle box just like fell out, like lures all the place, like everything just whipped in there. And I'm like, oh my god, it's so relatable, you know. So is it organized? Yeah, sometimes it's actually not been bad. I've been trying to unpack and take that time to unpack, but sometimes you get another trip coming right up. It's like, do I really want to unpack all this, find it again, and then go? So it's like your front hall starts to become your gear room in the summer. Not ideal. Or you start kind of throwing stuff in there. So yeah, I'd say more or less it was pretty messy for a while, but now I'm pretty on top of it because I save more time in the long run. So I'm going to say middle of the road, my gear room. I have a gear room in the house. I have another shed and almost two sheds too that are pretty much gear as well. So there's a lot of stuff to keep going. That cougar on a loan is what made me a fan, Jimmy. Thank you very much, Joe Lane. Yeah, that who knew that cougar was gonna be gonna help? Gonna bring me some fans. Thanks, I guess, for trying to eat me, cougar. What is the best way to get the fishy taste out of fish on a backpacking trip? I mean, it depends on what you're doing, but a lot of good things about bleeding your fish, just ripping one or two gills out like that. You know what I mean? I see if you seasoning. I don't mind what some people would consider a fishy taste either. Try Old Bay seasoning if you're eating trout. If you're not familiar with Old Bay, it's amazing. It's kind of a game changer for trout and salmon for sure. I think it's from like Massachusetts or somewhere on the East Coast in the States there. But anyways, yeah, check out Old Bay seasoning. That's good. Try bleeding the fish. That should help as well. Oh, the 4 to 5 days was referencing the figure eight on the French River route, not the 4 to 5 days for the bears. Sorry about that. You said it's not. It's way more time than you need. 4 to 5 days is way more time than you need for the figure eight loop on the French River. Yeah, that's probably. I guess that's true for sure. Me and Tori were traveling with our two very young kids, with pretty much a baby. My son Hudson was a baby, and our son Wesley with disabilities. So it depends on what pace you want to go if you're traveling with little kids, but. Yeah, we also didn't start at Hartley Bay. We started at Otter Rapids too, and then got our vehicle shuttled from Otter Rapids to Hartley Bay. Are there dangerous snakes in my area? There are Mississauga rattlers here. There's other rare kinds of rattlers. They're extremely rare. I've never seen one in my entire life. I was with some people who saw one, but I didn't see it. My brother's seen one. I saw a hognose snake here. That's not venomous. They are big and they try to pretend like they're cobras, but they're pretty much harmless. So there are here. I did have more closer to Georgian Bay. I had a friend who had a dog die from a rattlesnake bite. I think it was a smaller dog. So that's super rare. So in general, they're threatened or even endangered too. So it's something you don't want to be stupid about. Maybe a smaller kid could be more at risk of getting bit because they're not as big, so they don't have as much blood, so the venom's not as diluted. A dog that's smaller, these kinds of things. So you don't want to be stupid about it, but at the same time, they are very rare, but they do exist around here. Wrapping fish in common fern hides. The fish smell from the predators. Just a tip. Oh, nice tip, Dave. Little fishing tip. Paddle-Tay Adventures. Hey, Jim. Do you think you would try to do Great Bear Lake and its rivers to the Arctic? Would I try to do Great Bear Lake? So, I love Great Bear Lake. I snowmobiled across Great Bear Lake. And I headed it from Hornby Bay. I headed across the tree line, across the Arctic Circle to another river, a frozen river that we followed to Dismal Lakes. I think it's called the Thershipete River. I might be wrong. And then from there, so that's the Dismal River feeds the Coppermine. Then from there we went to the Arctic coast and continued all the way up to Uluwatu. 100% I would consider doing that. One of the rivers I looked at was the Sloan. I'd have to go up it and cross over to the Coppermine. There's another one on eastern Great Bear. I think it's called the Wetzel that I would consider using as a way to cut over to the Coppermine, Fairy Lake River, Hood River. That's like a 6-week trip that I've considered doing. I don't know if I'll ever do that one because I haven't done too many like trips that are 6 weeks, a month long now that I got little kids. You know, I do trips that with my family that are that long where we're, you know, camper vanning, camping, doing side trips or something like that. Or staying at a cabin or something like that, but not a hardcore canoe trip of that intensity with them at this age. That being said, I did get out for a long, you know, month longer with my brother before Huddy was born, and I'm looking at doing potentially another month longer next summer. Oh man, that would be awesome. Just the tank, you know, I caught tank lake trout at a Great Bear, like the fishing, the clear water, drinking the water. It's just, you just drink it right out of the lake. It's just, it's like the best water in the world. Really rugged country there in the Canadian Shield. So it's like you almost have like that kind of dramatic Canadian Shield like you see on the North Shore of Lake Superior, except for the stunted trees and that, you know, subarctic vegetation. Really, really cool. Tons of berries there that last well into the season, well into September and later. So yeah, I would, but would it be my first trip I'd do? I'd really like to paddle the Hood River. I think I really want to do one in Alaska. I've tripped in Alaska, the lower Stikine. We drove the Inside Passage and the ferry up past Sitka, you know, and then drove back into BC when we did the Stikine there. So yeah, I don't know. I might be looking at Yukon and Alaska before that, but man, it's. I'd say I'll say it's on my bucket list. We'll say that. Okay, paddling adventures radio. Any things to think about when taking a dog on extra long canoe trips in the north that people might not think about? I think when taking a dog on extra long canoe trips in the north, yeah, like, you know, that's a lot of dog food you gotta carry, you know. So if the dog is pulling a sled and like pulling his own weight, he can pull his own food. And I've taken my dogs on 36-day treks. Bring high performance food if you're gonna go with that. Bring kibble, not canned food. Bring high performance food, or it's the same thing pretty much as puppy chow. It's just super high calories. So your dog, you know, instead of having this much food, he gets the same calories with this much food, right? I would do that. I would bring a good doggy backpack, rough wear. They make a lot of like, I don't know, frou type stuff, but they do make the Palisades pack is the best dog pack I've ever seen. A lot of them just rip, they get lopsided, they don't work. That one has like a base that's it all clips on, and it's like a base harness, and then the kind of saddlebags go on top, and they can quickly be taken on and off, so you don't need to put their feet through and clip them off. You can just pull it off, put it on you if you're doing a river crossing, you know, put it back on the dog after, leave the harness on your dog, take it off when they're, you know, in the canoe, put it on them quickly on the portage trail. Then you're not carrying all their food, or you're carrying some of it. Other thing to think about when you're taking your dog and you're carrying all that food, you might want to be able to get your dog to eat fish. Fish is healthy food for dogs, so you might, you know, cook the fish for your dog. Raw fish 90% of the time is okay for a dog to eat. There's a chance they could get some parasites from raw freshwater fish. I mean, the Inuit feed it to their dogs all the time. They don't typically have issues. But yeah, if you could train your dog to eat fish, start with frozen. You slowly start introducing into their diet. Then you start with less frozen. Then they start loving frozen fish. It's good for their teeth. When you freeze it, it kills the parasites as well, same as if you cook it pretty much. And then you can start morphing them onto less frozen fish, and eventually get them to like fish. If it's been frozen, it won't have parasites in it, you know, right away either. So yeah, check that out. Also, really important, if your dog has a doggy backpack on, there might be times where he runs in the water, or, you know, falls in the water or whatever. Good thing to do is just make sure you put that food, and also just so the food doesn't spoil and get all wet, in the doggy backpack, put the dog kibble in small or dry bags, big as dry bags as you can fit, roll top dry bags. So that way, if the dog falls into the water, the backpack is going to act like a life preserver. It's actually going to float them, right, as opposed to sink them. Another thing is, depending on what river you're doing, whatnot, how good your dog is at swimming, you know, all that kind of stuff. Consider bringing a dog life preserver. Salus makes a good one. I don't. Dogs are, amazing swimmers. Just like they're much faster than Usain Bolt at running. They're much faster than Michael Phelps at swimming. They don't need to wear shoes. They don't get snow blindness. They don't freeze when it's -40. There's a lot of things that dogs are amazing at for sure. But if you're on a river where you got really pushy current, sweepers and stuff like that, life jacket's not a bad idea. You can buy a good one. Just be careful they don't overheat. Is another thing. If it's really hot out and you got a husky or dog with thick fur, they can overheat and have a seizure. So sometimes you might consider not bringing a life jacket or taking it on and off when needed. And I think that's probably about it. Dogs don't need as much stuff as people do, but they need those calories. They can help pull their own weight on portage trails and stuff like that if you bring a pack for them. But typically on a trip that long, it is challenging to carry all their food. Think about it. A dog eats a good dog, 70-pound dog, eats a full-size dog food bag a month. So if you're doing a month-long trip, you need to bring a huge bag of dog food. That's too much weight for the dog to carry. So now you're carrying a lot more weight on the portage trail. So just consider that and how to reduce that without starving your dog. Hope that helps. Paddling Adventures Radio, shut up. All right, what else we got here? Been to Wabakini yet? I have not been to Wabakini yet. I was thinking about getting up to Armstrong this summer as we drive out west, and maybe getting onto Caribou Lake, which connects into Wabakini. I don't know if I'd go in there, but I'll have to check it out, man. There's so many places. I'd like to go to Woodland Caribou as well. That'd be pretty cool. Maybe I'll do a winter trek in Wabakini. I don't know, but stay tuned. I've heard it's amazing, so it's definitely on my bucket list for sure. Ever thought of doing Lake Nipigon? Yeah, I've always wanted to go to Lake Nipigon. Like, I would buy like a cottage on Lake Nipigon. I love the fishing. I love the coaster brookies that they have in the Nipigon River. I love the Lake Superior country. There's moose and deer there. It's huge. It's wild. It's remote. It connects to places like the Kopka River. So cool. I should, it's just going and doing it. I guess my issue is that just doing Lake Nipigon, I don't see it in and of itself just as a paddling destination. Maybe I should, right? Why not? Yeah, why wouldn't I see Lake Nipigon? I should paddle it and then paddle down to Lake Superior or something. But I'd maybe do it if I was going to do something like the Kopka River and then paddle the coast of Lake Nipigon or something. But yeah, I'd love to check it out for sure. Ever been on the Moisey River? Yes, I have been on the Moisey River. I paddled it when I was probably 23, right when I was getting into remote wilderness trips and whitewater trips. My brother and I and a couple friends, my buddy Ari and my girlfriend at the time, paddled in the Nahanni the year before. I'd done some whitewater trips, nothing crazy. The Nahanni had some whitewater, but nothing super advanced. And so the Moisey was like way harder, man. And that's a river where, you'll have back-to-back challenging portages, right? So it's like a lot of your days are just consumed. Like, you finish a tough portage and it's like all of a sudden you go downriver, really tough eddy out that you have to be careful about, or you could whip over a waterfall, followed by another horrifically challenging portage, and then just downriver another one, and then a terrifying lining, then running 2 rapids, lining another one, horrific portage, and then the day's over. So there's some days that were kind of really physically challenging further upriver, but overall really cool river, really beautiful country. not too expensive as far as like a wilderness trip goes. You can do it on a shoestring budget because you can use the train, so you can drive or take the train up to Labrador City and take it down, paddle it down to the Gulf of the St. Lawrence where you left your vehicle, or you can put your vehicle on the train and have it, drive to Lab City, put your vehicle on your train and get the train to drive it down to Sept-Îles, paddle back to the highway, get a short drive back to Sept-Îles, pick up your vehicle and drive home. So it's not a super expensive or super long trip either. There's a book on it. It's one of the first books about planning wilderness canoe trips. I think it was written in the 70s. It's called The Complete Wilderness Paddler. And these guys were sort of some of the first canoeists to put the Moisey on the map. Great river for sure. Love it. Moisey River. I might paddle it again one of these days. Oh, I'm getting a lot of great comments here. Most incredible river I've ever been on. Thank you, Jim. That's the guy, Lavalley, or is it Lavelle? Talking about, thanks for the comment and bringing back my memories on the Moisey. I'm glad we both had that experience. Definitely an incredible river, to say the least. The other one I've paddled up that way that you might want to check out is the Natashquan. I actually paddled the East Natashquan, or the East Branch of Natashquan River, and that was pretty neat. I got some videos up on it. Challenging river as well. The East Natashquan, some big portages. Natashquan itself, by the time I got to it, was some big water, but nothing like the Moisey. Big, much larger volume river. But I love that whole area. The Côte Nord of Quebec is just awesome. Curious about the permethrin and if you use it. I haven't used permethrin. That's the bug infused clothing. I think they put it in the clothing. I haven't tried it out. I've heard some really good things though. So yeah, I would try it. When you are paddling 16-foot boats solo in whitewater, have you considered a center seat for removable yoke? You're you're a big guy like me. Me width probably isn't an issue, or do you prefer to sit in the bow seat and face backwards? So canoes are symmetrical. So a lot of the ways you paddle solo as a canoe is you sit in the bow seat, but you face backwards and thus make the stern your bow. So often when I'm paddling like a 15-foot prospector, I'll remove the stern seat, make the stern my bow, essentially paddle the canoe backwards. I don't know if they're symmetrical, so there's no real backwards or forwards, right? But the problem is if you sit closer to the center, then the carrying yoke's in your way. So you have to have a removable carrying yoke and screw it in and take it out when you do portages, or else you won't be able to sit there. But the boat is essentially easier to maneuver. So like I paddle a 15-foot prospector solo. The other boat I solo is a Moisey 16.6, and that is long. So I would say moving that seat forward and removing that carrying yoke, yes, it would be better. One time I did blow out my shoulder trying to move a seat closer to midships in a 17-foot prospector, and I had to overextend to do a cross draw quickly, and I blew out my shoulder, and it's had issues ever since. So when those bigger boats are wider in the middle, it's harder to reach across and do a cross draw. So that's why you see a lot of the time Bill Mason, what he would do when he came to one of these rapids, he just kneel with literally his thighs under the carrying yoke, which is essentially the middle thwart. I don't even know if it had a yoke back then. It's just a thwart. People just lashed paddles down and carried a paddle blade on each shoulder, lashed paddles down in between the thwarts. That's the traditional way. They never had yokes. And so he kneeled like that. But if you look at the way Bill Mason paddled, he didn't do so many cross draws. He did a lot of pries to side slip. So he was really good at just prying side strip, which is essentially the same, it moves you the same way as a cross draw. And I think that was because where you're sitting in these larger prospector canoes, they're very wide. Now, when you're sitting in the front seat and paddling backwards, the canoe's narrow back there, so it's not as hard to cross draw. The only thing is, in the Moisey 16.6, it's a very maneuverable boat and arguably a better boat to paddle solo in whitewater than a 15-foot prospector. Arguably easier to paddle. However, if you start to get sideways in the Moisey 16.6, it's hard to straighten out. Because being tall, it's easier. Same thing with the 15-foot prospector. Because I'm tall, because I have a long reach, if I start to get sideways, I can reach far and to the bow and do a bow draw and pull that canoe back straighter, which would be more challenging to somebody else, even harder to do in a 16.6. So I'd say the reason I don't, first of all, the removable carrying yoke is a bit of a hassle. I have one in my Supernova small whitewater boat because you have to have one in that, and also I'm running like most stuff in that boat anyways. But yeah, so the removable carrying yoke's a bit of a hassle, and also I don't really rig up my 16.6 Moisey for solo paddling because I want to leave that as a tandem boat. Typically, I'd rather have it rigged for tandem so I can use it for tandem whitewater paddling. Would it make sense to pop a seat, maybe not have a removable carrying yoke, but let's say move my stern or my bow seat that I paddle in backwards, maybe move that up closer to the carrying yoke by 6 inches without having a carrying yoke in my 15-foot prospector? I'd say so. Are you better even closer? My friend Nate, he paddles a 14-foot prospector with a removable carrying yoke, and he sits in the canoe and it's just trimmed perfectly every time. Right, so that's another thing. If you're paddling that boat solo, your bow's sticking out of the water. You start to run into issues when you don't have gear and stuff like that too. So, long answer and no real definitive answer. I would say, depending on the width of your boat, be careful about shoulder injuries. Consider maybe switching up your paddling style a bit. Switching sides, or like Bill Mason doing the pries instead of cross draws, but be careful about shoulder injury. But if you want to have a boat that you can quickly change for solo and then rig it back to tandem as opposed to planning on leaving it one way or the other, I think why not? I would probably go for it. But you know what? It's not perfect, but I do pretty well paddling in the front seat facing backwards for my 15-foot prospector. So yeah, I guess I'd have to try it out a bit first. So long answer, but some things to keep in mind there. I don't know what the right answer to that is. In general, maybe don't take the seat out, maybe try moving it. If you can move it a foot forward, say 6 inches forward without having to have a removable carrying yoke, maybe give that a shot. Might not be a bad idea because then it's not going to be as wide and you still might be able to cross draw. So, okay, I'll do one more question and then I got to go and get back to planning my expedition. Are bear bangers exclusive to Canadians? I haven't really heard of them. Yeah, I brought it up to like Alaskans and they're like, what the heck is that? And I know in the States I don't really see them. The company's called True Flare. I don't know why, but I heard you can't get them in the States. I've had them work personally. I've had them work better than a gun and I have this in one of my videos where we did a 33-day canoe expedition across northern Quebec and Labrador, and we actually were charged by an angry sow, and it hit like a patch of alders, which slowed it down, and when it got through those alders, it wasn't running anymore, but it was looking at us standing up like this. Well, before it charged us, we were yelling at it, started kind of moseying on its merry way, not fast enough, so boom, I fired a warning shot, not to hit it, but, off to the side there, just so the sound would scare it. And, that's what made it start moseying away. Then we yelled at it and it turned around and charged us. Once it got through the alders, we fired a bear banger at it. The bear banger blew up right over its head. It fell onto its ass, and then it took off, not running full speed. But that's what actually scared it, because the explosion happened right in its face, as opposed to back where the muzzle of the gun was. Probably was over 100 yards away at the time. So yeah, bear bangers work. They don't actually hurt the bear, but they work. And you got to be careful, because if the bear's really close and you fire the bear banger over the bear and it blows up behind the bear, it might run towards you. So there's times where you should shoot it in the air, blah blah blah. But you got to be smart about these things. So yeah, the answer is they might be exclusive to Canada. I know polar bear guards in Labrador have had good luck using them. You can buy bear alarm fence. It's called Ice Bear Alarm. Check it out, polarsupplies.com, I believe it is, and they actually those shoot off shotgun blanks. You can buy bear fences that shoot off bear bangers though, and they use them in Labrador, and they work to scare off even polar bears. So some people might say, oh, those don't work. Well, I've seen them work right in front of my very eyes. I even scared off a pack of wolves that was following me. A pack of Arctic wolves was following us. We fired one of those. They took off terrified. So, they have their place for sure. Okay. Love your videos. Thanks for all the great comments. We need another Yukon trip. This one with Ted. Yeah, so me and Ted have been humming and hawing and looking at putting together Yukon and Alaska adventure for next summer. So that might be in the books. Would be awesome. We might want to do something where we get into some salmon fishing in Alaska. A few different thoughts and ideas there. So stay tuned for that. And I guess that's about it. I'm going to sign off. Everybody, thank you very much for, I saw a couple people there did like a donation. So I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody logging in and doing this. I'm sorry I couldn't get a video up this week. Hoping to do more of these live chats. Been talking about a podcast for a while, so that's still in the cards. And if you don't follow me on my social media channels, check out Instagram at JB Adventurer and at Jim Baird Adventurer on Facebook. If you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, would really appreciate the subscription. And hoping that you guys everybody will be super excited about this Yukon film series for another 14-day solo expedition on a super remote, fly-in only whitewater river in the Yukon territory. Be coming right up. A few other videos before that, so should be some stuff to get you excited. Whether you like to live vicariously or whether you like to get fired up to get out on adventures of your own. So thanks a lot, everybody, and we'll see you next time.